Okay, good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Clemo, CSI. Welcome to the second series of webinars, second webinar in the series, which is designed to really help our customers and people within the sphere of small and medium banking fraternity in terms of trying to share talk about the hot topics within IT services at the moment, and I try and get the benefit of that. And it's a series that we'll be running hopefully about once a month. And today we'll be looking at the benefits of adopting the cloud and really taking special account in terms of the latest regulations and in terms of managing your process through that. Upcoming, the next one we'll be looking at actually the opportunities in open banking. Open banking has been really looked on as a bit of a problem with companies to actually overcome, but we want to talk about actually what the opportunities of what's come out of that. And then the third one in March we'll be doing a debate looking at how small medium companies can innovate and maybe move away from the traditional single vendor approach. Do you want to move on to the next one, Richard? Thank you very much. So today we'll be looking at the benefits of the cloud, latest regulation. What we've asked for Richard Smith, who's an independent consultant who's been in this really sort of niche sector for a while and has worked with quite a few financial institutions in helping them to adopt new services and go through significant change. And obviously he can provide his expertise and what he's seeing in the current environment in terms of adopting cloud technologies and that latest regulatory piece. So without ado, I'll pass over to Richard.
Thank you, Matthew. So as Matthew was trying to talk about me, I'll do that anyway. I'm an independent enterprise architect and consultant, and I've been independent for just over 15, almost 16 years actually, supplying to many clients. I get involved in digital transformations and initiatives generally, and I do that across many sectors. But that also includes cloud initiatives. So, whether it's finance, security services, life sciences, government, space, telecoms, retail, media, just to name a few. In terms of financial services experience, that covers 10 banks, 4 startups looking to become banks, several fintechs and suppliers into that sector as well. Basically, in short, I normally act as that bridge between that strategic intent and that making it happen. So what would I be covering today? What are the expected benefits of moving to cloud? What are the internal and regulatory considerations? How do financial services organisations move to the cloud? The normal quick disclaimer, obviously, every effort's made to make sure that this information is correct and up to date. It is primarily UK focused. Obviously, bear in mind that if you were to start your initiative in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, there may be different regulations. So, please keep those things in mind. And also, this is a 30-minute presentation on quite a deep subject, so there aren't any deep dives. But if there is anything anybody wants to know in more depth, please ask questions or please get in touch. And talking about questions, so look, I like to have interactive sessions. So, and I believe they provide the most value, not to just yourselves, but also me. So if you do have any questions during this webinar, please do ask them using the question function, which is normally at the bottom of the screen on Zoom. We'll hold a Q&A session after the presentation. We will disable the recording during the Q&A as well, so don't worry about that. The recording is really just for the presentation. But before we get into the topic, what is cloud? So, cloud is one of those words that gets bandied around, sometimes with, let's face it, very little context. You ask a bunch of people what they think cloud is, and you'll likely get a bunch of opinions. It's just someone else's server. It's a commercial consumption model. It's like renting a car, or maybe yours differs and you can insert it there. These views aren't necessarily wrong, and they will usually reflect the person's perspective, their prioritizations, and the perceived benefits they see of cloud. But what's my view of cloud? So I see cloud as a consumption of technology services as a utility. I don't need to build a power plant to consume electricity. I don't need to purify and pipe water to be able to drink it. And so do I really need to build out a huge catalogue of technology services, build the infrastructures, and hire thousands of engineers and developers in the hope that those functions might provide value? Hopefully not, because otherwise what's the point of this presentation? But more importantly, what's the regulator's view of cloud? So the typical definition regulators use is the encompassing a range of IT services provided in various formats over the internet. This includes, for example, private, public, or hybrid cloud, as well as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Cloud services are constantly evolving. And that's pretty much an encompassing all definition. And you'll find that where a regulation comes in financing, specifically is to address cloud, there'll be a range, depending on the wording, it will sound something like that. So, obviously, as I just touched on, as a service, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, most cloud offerings will fit in one of those buckets, but what's right for your organization? And hopefully, we'll have an answer to that question towards the end. So getting back on topic, not that we've started it yet, what are the benefits of cloud services? So, the first one, access to a large catalogue of ever-evolving services. You just have to look at the three main public cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, and the sheer amount of services each one offers. And it seems like a weekly occurrence that they'll offer something new, or they'll add major functionality to an existing service. And this is not limited just to those three. They're innovative, SaaS and private cloud providers that offer cloud solutions that AWS, Azure, and GCP aren't. And some of those solutions are aimed specifically at the needs of financial services organizations. Examples could be providers like our host today, CSI, or providers such as SaaScard, .Connect, Tink. And faster provisioning times. So, time is money, and in projects, significant resource burn can occur in provisioning IT systems. Many organizations adopt cloud collaboration tools such as Microsoft Teams and Zoom, like we're using now, to support working from home as part of the business continuity during the initial COVID lockdown. This was made possible and appropriate through fast provisioning. And yes, although some of these implementations may be questionable in terms of strategic growth and security, the solid foundations of these tools and the provisioning times made them perfect in providing that tactical facility quickly. Resilience, availability, reliability, and quality of service. These are concerns not only to an organization, but of regulation, and generally, cloud will have the edge. To replicate this within on-prem, the level of resilience, availability, reliability, or quality of service can lead to buying far more equipment than is actually needed to host a particular workload, and the operational overheads that entails. Flexibility and pay for what you use. You can dial up, you can dial down. In general, cloud provides right-sized scalability and is costed accordingly. This might be a per user per month, or hours of compute, or per request serviced, or other consumption metric. This is great for business cases linking operational costs to use, and also allows for growth in line with business strategy, and without having to front load capacity or having to estimate capacity for the next 5 years. It eliminates barriers to access. Although this is more beneficial for startups, this also has an advantage for smaller organizations wanting to compete with larger established players. Building out utility as an organization can be expensive, time consuming, to the point where it diminishes potential benefits and even blocks progression. Cloud provides that utility, allowing you to craft your value proposition on top, linking utility costs to growth and success. It eliminates costly infrastructure refresh cycles, that whole tracking of end of life, that mean time to failure, mean time to repair, and the support matrix you have to maintain between operating infrastructure hardware components is not required with cloud. Somebody else is doing that for you as part of managing that utility. Typical infrastructure refresh cycles are every 5 years, requiring large capex expenditure, migration plans for existing workloads, and predicting what the organisation may want for from its IT in terms of functionality and capacity over the next 5 years. Enhanced disaster recovery and business continuity options, typically on-prem DR and BC are expensive and inflexible, usually consisting of multiple data centres, equipment, and providing alternative work locations. Many of these on-prem DR and BC options hadn't considered pandemic as part of their scenario planning and were really found lacking over the last year. Extensive catalogue of options, faster provisioning times, flexible capacity, and elimination of barriers. DR and BC can be flexibly crafted to provide a larger umbrella of coverage and help adapt in unforeseen events. Enhanced security, and years ago, security was generally cited as the reason not to adopt cloud services. I remember having those arguments with people many years ago. But cloud services will generally be built to a higher level of security consideration than typical on-prem equivalents. Cloud providers are scrutinised against security guidelines, frameworks. They're tested against multiple industry requirements, and they hire security experts that have both, the breadth and the depth of understanding across their offerings. Now, there is always a bit of a caveat to that. The value you craft on top, or if you're building configurations outside of cloud best practice, they can lead to security vulnerability, but that is just the same as on-prem. Longer term, it's going to be increasingly difficult to operate on-premise infrastructure. As the rest of the world moves to cloud, the economies of scale enjoyed by those that individually run infrastructure operations are going to disappear. We're seeing this largely with software vendors now. They are especially pivoting towards cloud models where either the cloud instance has more functionality, it is operationally cheaper, or they're just abandoning it on-prem alternatives altogether. And I'm working with a software company at the moment. They're doing both an on-prem and a cloud option, but the on-prem option is crippled in terms of functionality and is going to cost more. So, the cloud is largely the way to go. And you can adopt as you go. Today you might only be interested in maybe hosting a new server workload in the cloud, but tomorrow you may wish to consume more advanced services such as artificial intelligence, advanced data analytics, or IoT services. Flexibility allows you to adopt the service you want, and further increasing the advantage technology can bring to an organization. But I haven't mentioned cost savings yet. Show me the money. Is cloud actually cheaper? Yes, maybe. A phrase I've heard more often than I would like. If it's not cheaper, there is no point. But if costs your only driver, why not completely abandon IT? Paper-based ledger in each branch. Get people to visit the branch. Money transfers using paper money. Yes, it does sound daft. Without IT, the organisation can't effectively operate and compete. So without adopting cloud, would you be able to compete in the future? But let's get to the nitty-gritty, regarding cost. It can be hard to compare the price of apples and oranges. Comparing the cost of server instance in the cloud to a virtual machine on-prem can make the cloud look more costly. But if you take into consideration all of the CapEx investment and ongoing OpEx costs in maintaining that utility, cloud can start to look cheaper. Adoption of cloud services does not lead to staff reduction alone, and I know some people cite that as a potential cost saving. Alone, it generally doesn't. Initial implementation and migration costs may be high. Certain services may require major rework to operate within cloud environments, and that could be things like mainframe services and having to recompile those to work in what is largely an x86 world when it comes to cloud. Some offerings aren't even comparable. You wouldn't practically be able to replicate certain cloud offerings on-prem. Things like cognitive services. You may not want to use them today, but you may want to use them tomorrow. Overall IT costs could go up as the advantage of technology enables growth of your business. But then that's no different to IT over the last 30 years. IT has generally got, or the IT department has generally spent more, but the business has got more from it. Even if there are not direct cost savings, return on investment is likely to be higher through the adoption of cloud strategy. But cost focus alone misses the point of cloud adoption. So internal and regulatory considerations. Now, I know this can be a dry subject, actually it verges on arid. Work with me, I work with the material I have, so please try and stay awake for this one. Don't worry about taking notes. We'll supply everybody a set of slides who wants them afterwards. So regulatory guidance and adherence, you should look at when adopting cloud or other types of outsourcing. So we have FG 16.5 from the FCA. That's the guidance for firms outsourcing to the cloud. We have 2017-03 from the EBA, the recommendations on outsourcing to cloud service providers. We have EOPA, and now if the UK had been in the EU for an extra day, we would have had to have actually adopted EOPA into law, but we weren't. It's predominantly aimed at insurance and pension organisations operating in the EU, but even for other types of financial organisations and organisations based in the UK, it does have some useful guidance in there, so it's worth reviewing. We have the various chapters of the Senior Management Arrangements, Systems and Controls Manual from the FCA. We have the 29/02 from the EBA on outsourcing arrangements. We have the UK PSR 2017, PSD2, and the related regulatory technical standards, whether you refer to them as SCA RTS or the new UK RTS. MIFID, really only for those firms that come under MIFID, so those that do investment activity. But again, there's some common sense in there. And to come during 2021, things that we know, the FCA, PRA and BOE have been looking at operational resilience and the impact tolerances for important business services. So expect publications to land around that subject this year. So the documents relating to the regs and guidance I've called out amount to hundreds and hundreds of pages. So I have high level summarised each of those documents, or each of what those documents contain. But I figured it would be boring going through those points, so I'm just going to skip them all to a matrix. So here's a matrix which will hopefully emphasise my next point. Yes, some poor souls are going to have to study and understand the regulatory requirements, but they are essentially informed common sense stuff for building fit for purpose resilient systems which avoid lock-in and can be audited. And if we look at some of these things, risk management, BCP and DR, business case rationale and governance, due diligence, security, exit planning, right to audit, and yes, the FCA wants some level of notification. These aren't, these regulations and the regulators are not looking to block cloud adoption. They see the benefit of adopting cloud themselves, and after all, the FCA and the PRA use cloud services themselves, and BOE are looking to do so, starting this year. So what are the high-level internal considerations? And for the purposes of brevity, I haven't listed every possible consideration, but for operations and execution departments, are services providing the required resilience and performance? Are the services a good fit for operation and execution functions? For your sales and marketing departments, are the services supporting customer engagement? Do the services provide insight to what the customer wants? For your risk and compliance departments, are the services conformant and, where required, supporting the organisation's regulatory obligations? Is MI available for reporting obligations? And for your business support departments, are the services providing the business what it needs? Are they good value in terms of ROI? Are the services adequately supported? Do we have the right people and partners, and what are the training requirements? Are information security considerations being addressed? Now, let's face it, all of those are very similar to internal IT and typical outsourcing arrangements. So blasting off, how to move to cloud. Yeah, we've explored the benefits of adopting cloud services. We've explored that the considerations are not blockers and even advocate cloud services. So what's next? Do you big bang, aggressively remove all your on-prem services and adopt 100% cloud services like for like? Do you do iterative slow burn, adopt cloud gradually based on new requirements as they come? Transformation and change, maybe a transformation need will come, replace all existing services with new cloud services, or potentially other options. Now, I find the best approach in moving to cloud is individual to each organisation and where they are currently. So here is a summarised architecture approach for approach to defining the move. Because I'm an architect, this is an iterative cycle of discovery, definition, design, and deliver. And again, I'm just going to summarise all these, but just keep in mind, just enough, just in time. Avoid boiling the ocean. Too much planning and too little doing. You just end up going into paralysis, or even arguably worse, doing no upfront investigation and planning, and then getting lost in the weeds and trying to firefight your way through this. So discovery, typically, what is the current technology landscape and estate? The constraints. What does the business want to do? What is coming on the technology horizon? Are there other opportunities? And just to dive slightly a bit more into the points that are highlighted in red, what does the technology landscape estate look like for your organisation? What technology services are provided? How are these services provided? Costs associated with these services? And if possible, try and link the direct and indirect association to value. Relevant policies relating to security, outsourcing and cloud, and the alignment of these policies to regulation. Who are the business service owners? Grading of the services based on potential business impact. Required service levels and key performance indicators. Dependencies and links between business, services and technology platforms. What does the technology horizon look like for your organisation? Any end of life or end of contract events coming up? Business strategy alignment. Difficult to support heritage systems. Services with increased cost. Dissatisfaction with current services from the greater business. And transformation and change demands. Moving on to the definition. So the direction of travel, the roadmap. Issues to address and changes required. Solutions to adopt, potential partners. Design, translating the concepts into deliverable elements. Now, this could involve different artifacts. It could be high level and low level designs, customer journeys, flows, functional requirements, non-functional requirements. It's basically bridging definition of scope and delivery. And the actual delivery. So, delivery facilitation, project divide and assignment, the resourcing, and interfacing with partners. And to slightly dive into resourcing.
Thank you, Richard. That's really good. You could just tell there's a lot of considerations that you need to make, and that really demonstrates that. I think we'll go into the questions in a sec. And I think I just wanted to do a very quick ditty, and I think it's very much in the lines of what you were talking about, Richard. I think it's about the preparation. To be successful, you need to be prepared, and it's really understanding what you need to do before you go on that journey. And I think CSI, we do this, and we feel that once we do this with customers and set the correct foundations, that generally really means that the success of the whole project is far far more easier to achieve without really not taking those considerations. So, just in, if you're making a major change in your organizations, if you're changing to regulation where you're becoming a bank, you're adopting a new platforms, or moving to having a major infrastructure change, that really make sure the whole organization is really aligned in terms of the strategy, people and processes are there aligned for the new world, and ensure that you've got your policies, you've done a risk assessment, and your standards are all in place for what you require. So, sometimes it's quite difficult to actually understand, to carry out that and understand from an independent point of view, have you done that? And I think CSI have consultants on board that can help you understand where, if you have a gap there, and actually then put a roadmap into place before you really start that project. So feel free to reach out if that's of interest. Maybe if we can take it through to the next slide, Richard. Yeah, thanks very much. We'd like to, if please ask any questions. I think there was a huge amount of ground that Richard covered, and so please feel free to ask any questions now, or if you want to post some questions through to Richard later on, and we will be sending out the presentation anyway to everybody for reference.